When my family left for that 2-week trip, the house felt both quieter and heavier than I expected. My stepbrother, Dean, had insisted I should come with him, but I told him work shifts and summer classes made it impossible. That was the truth, at least partly. The other truth was harder to admit. I wanted space, a little air without my parents hovering over every decision. What I didn't anticipate was that Dean's best friend would end up staying behind too, and that his presence would change everything. Travis arrived the same evening. My family's car pulled out of the driveway. He came carrying a duffel bag slung over his shoulder, his grin easy casual, as if this was the most natural arrangement in the world. I had seen him around for years, mostly in the orbit of my stepbrother, but I never thought of him as anything more than a fixture in the background of family barbecues or late-night video game sessions in Dean's room. That first night, though, I noticed details I hadn't before. The way his laugh came quick and genuine, the way he leaned against the doorframe like he belonged anywhere he stood. "Hope you don't mind," he said as he stepped inside, sneakers squeaking lightly on the hardwood. Dean said it'd be cool if I crashed here while they're gone. Something about saving gas and me not driving back and forth across town. I nodded, trying to act unbothered. Yeah, sure. Makes sense. The truth was, I didn't mind. The thought of spending 2 weeks completely alone in that house had settled in my chest like a stone. Having someone else there, even if it was Travis, felt like a kind of relief. Still, the arrangement carried a quiet strangeness. My stepbrother trusted me, trusted him, and I wondered if either of us deserved that trust. The first day slipped into a rhythm faster than I expected. He claimed the guest room at the end of the hall, dumped his stuff without ceremony, and made himself comfortable. By the second night, we were sharing takeout cartons at the kitchen counter, talking about everything from baseball to music to professors we both couldn't stand. He was a year older than me, had a grin that looked like it didn't know how to quit, and a way of making silence feel full instead of awkward. One evening a storm rolled in, the kind that rattles windows and darkens the sky, far earlier than it should. I found him standing at the sliding glass door, watching sheets of rain blur the backyard into a gray haze. I joined him without thinking, and for a long moment we just stood there. His shoulder was close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating through his t-shirt, the faint smell of soap and summer sweat lingering in the air. "Crazy how quiet it gets when the rain comes down like that," he said, his voice lower than usual, like the storm itself was demanding reverence. I nodded, though my chest was tightening with something I couldn't name. "Yeah, it's different." He glanced at me then, just for a second, but it was enough. His eyes lingered in a way that wasn't casual, wasn't the kind of look you gave your best friend's stepbrother. I turned back to the glass, pretending to be fascinated by the lightning splitting the clouds. Inside, though, I knew I'd noticed him differently for the first time, and that noticing had already begun to feel dangerous. Over the next few days, little moments kept stacking on top of each other. The brush of his arm, when we both reached for the remote. The way his laughter came a half-second too late, like he was watching me more than he was reacting to the joke. Even the silence started to feel loaded, carrying something heavier than the absence of words. I told myself it was nothing, just the closeness of sharing space, the trick of an empty house making everything louder, sharper, more intense. But each night, when the house settled into its creaks and sighs, I replayed those looks, those small touches, until sleep felt impossible. It was on the fourth night, sitting in the kitchen long after midnight, that the weight of it finally pressed down on me. He was across from me at the counter, leaning back in the chair, his hair a little messy, his smile slow and tired. We weren't saying much, just sipping sodas like two people avoiding bed. "Funny," he murmured, eyes dropping to the can in his hands. "Feels like we're the only two people in the world right now." I laughed softly, but the sound caught in my throat. "Yeah, it kinda does." Our eyes met across the counter, and for a heartbeat too long, neither of us looked away. My pulse thudded, heavy in my ears, and in that moment I realized a truth I'd been trying to bury. Something unspoken had already begun between us. Something I couldn't explain, couldn't control, and definitely couldn't admit out loud. And yet I knew. The secret had already started, even if no words had been spoken. The days that followed blurred into a rhythm that felt almost like a world carved out for just the two of us. Morning light spilled across the kitchen table, and there he was, always half asleep, hair in a mess, nursing a cup of coffee like it was the only thing tethering him to earth. I found myself waiting for those mornings, listening for his footsteps, catching the uneven cadence of his voice when he finally spoke. We spent our afternoons in the living room, sometimes with music low in the background, sometimes with the TV flashing scenes neither of us paid attention to. What mattered wasn't what we were doing. It was how easily the space between us seemed to shrink. When he laughed, I laughed. When he sighed, I felt the echo in my chest. The house, which had felt so wide and empty after my family left, now seemed crowded with something unsaid, like every corner had begun listening to us. One evening, while scrolling through playlists, he tossed his phone onto the couch beside me and asked, "Pick something, anything you think fits the mood." I thumbed through his songs, the titles sliding past in endless rows. I picked one at random, but when the first chords filled the room, his eyes softened. He didn't say a word, but I caught the way he leaned back, letting the music wash over him, like it meant more than he could admit. I wanted to ask about it, wanted to press into the silence between the notes, but instead, I just let the song play. Later that night, after the dishes were piled high in the sink and the world outside had gone quiet, we lingered in the kitchen again. He told me about his father, about the weight of expectations he'd never asked for. His voice carried a thin edge, like he'd said these things before, but never really wanted to. I listened, watching the way his hands fidgeted with the soda can, his knuckles pale against the aluminum. "You ever feel like you're just existing for someone else?" he asked, almost too softly. The words caught me off guard, but I understood them. All the time, I admitted. He looked at me then, really looked, and I felt the heaviness of it settle into my chest. It wasn't just conversation anymore. It was something raw, something neither of us could dismiss. That night, after he went to bed, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. His words replayed in my mind, echoing against my own buried thoughts. There was a pull between us now, undeniable and dangerous, and I could feel myself crossing lines I had sworn not to touch. The next afternoon we decided to cook together, even though neither of us had the patience for recipes. The kitchen turned into chaos. Spilled sauce, laughter too loud, a mess we both knew we'd have to clean later. At one point, while reaching for the same pan, his hand brushed against mine. Just a fleeting second, a spark, but it burned through me like lightning. Neither of us pulled away immediately. We just froze, eyes locked, until I finally stepped back, heart hammering. He didn't mention it, but the air shifted. Every gesture after that felt sharpened, charged. Even silence seemed louder, as if the house itself knew what was happening. That evening, we sat on opposite ends of the couch, a movie flickering on the screen, both of us pretending to care about it. But the distance between us was a lie. My chest ached with the weight of holding back words, and his glances, quick, hesitant, told me he was carrying the same burden. Halfway through the movie, the power flickered. A storm had rolled in again, thunder grumbling in the distance. The lights dimmed and steadied, but in that brief darkness, I felt the world tip forward. When the screen came back, he was staring at me. Neither of us moved for what felt like a lifetime. I swallowed hard, breaking the silence. "We shouldn't." "I know," he cut in quickly, almost desperate. His jaw tightened, and he shifted his gaze back to the television, though his focus was gone. The words hung between us like a verdict. We shouldn't. We both knew it. Yet the acknowledgement only seemed to press us closer together, like naming it gave it shape, made it real. That night, I dreamt of his hand brushing mine again, of his voice carrying truths neither of us could afford to speak. And when I woke, I realized the dream wasn't just a dream. It was a memory replaying itself in different shades. As the days stretched forward, our secret grew heavier. No one else knew. No one else could guess. But inside the walls of that quiet house, it was impossible to ignore. I had started to betray the trust my stepbrother placed in both of us. And worse, I had started betraying the promises I made to myself about what I would never allow to happen. Yet even with guilt twisting inside me, I couldn't stop waiting for the next small moment, the next brush of his arm, the next glance held too long. By the end of the week, I knew with absolute certainty. We were no longer just housemates passing the time. We were a secret in motion. It was only a matter of when, not if, it would cross the point of no return. The days began to feel stolen, as if each hour we shared was borrowed from a world that wasn't supposed to exist. Travis and I moved to the house like shadows orbiting one another, always circling, always aware, never colliding, at least not yet. Every glance carried weight. Every silence swelled with the threat of what we weren't saying. I told myself to keep it under control, but my restraint was fraying. One evening, I found him stretched across the couch, a book resting on his chest, eyes closed as though the heat of summer had lulled him into sleep. I stood there longer than I should have, watching the slow rise and fall of his breath, the way a stray lock of hair curled against his forehead. When his eyes flicked open and caught me, I felt exposed, like he had read every thought I'd been trying to bury. "You were staring," he said, his voice carrying a lazy sort of amusement. But there was something else in it, too. Something testing. I forced a laugh. "You were drooling. Hard not to notice." He smirked, but neither of us looked away, and the air between us seemed to tighten. Moments like that left me shaken, both drawn closer and desperate to pull away. The secrecy pressed heavier on me when Dean called one night. I paced the kitchen, phone pressed to my ear, while Travis leaned against the counter across from me, listening silently. Dean's voice was casual, asking how the house was, if I was keeping up with my summer class, if Travis was behaving himself. The irony nearly split me in half. I forced out reassurances, even joked that Travis was making more of a mess than I could clean. But the entire time, my chest thudded with guilt. Dean trusted me, trusted both of us, and that trust was cracking under the weight of everything unsaid. When I hung up, the silence between Travis and me was deafening. He studied me for a long moment before muttering, "You hate lying to him." I swallowed hard. "Don't you?" He didn't answer, and in that non-answer, I heard everything. The next night, we walked outside after dinner, the air still carrying the damp scent of the afternoon's rain. The neighborhood was hushed, streetlights flickering halos onto the pavement. We didn't say much, just walked side by side, footsteps soft against the sidewalk. At one point, he slowed, looking at me with a strange intensity. "You ever think about what happens when they get back?" he asked. I froze, because of course I had. Every day, every hour. "Yeah," I said finally, my voice low. "I think about it all the time." He didn't press further, but the question lingered, stretching between us like a fault line waiting to crack. Later that week, it happened. Not a confession, not an explosion, but something quieter, more dangerous. We were watching a movie again, both pretending to care about the screen. A storm rattled against the windows, thunder rolling low across the sky. The room was dim, the flicker of the TV casting shifting shadows. He shifted closer, so close that his knee brushed mine. I should have pulled away, should have put space between us. But I didn't. Neither did he. The silence thickened, louder than the rain, louder than the thunder. My heart slammed against my ribs, and in that silence, I heard him whisper, almost too softly, catch, "I can't stop thinking about this." I turned, searching his face, desperate to be sure I'd heard right. His eyes were locked on mine, steady, unflinching. "You shouldn't say that," I whispered back, my throat tight. "I know," he replied, and the honesty in his voice sent a chill through me. That was the moment we crossed the line, even if nothing more happened. Words had been spoken that couldn't be taken back, a truth dragged out into the open where it couldn't be ignored. My chest burned with both relief and panic. After that night, everything was different. The house no longer felt neutral. It was charged, buzzing with something volatile. Every glance was longer, every brush of skin deliberate. We didn't speak of it again, but the silence only made it more real. I tried to distract myself, diving into assignments, washing dishes, anything to keep my hands busy. But even then, I felt his presence, the way he lingered nearby, the way his gaze followed me. It was maddening, intoxicating, impossible to escape. One morning, I woke to find him already in the kitchen making coffee. His back was to me, but when he turned, our eyes met in a way that stopped me cold. There was no hiding in that look, no pretending. It was all there, desire, guilt, longing, and something dangerously close to love. I wanted to speak, to demand clarity, to beg him to tell me what we were doing. But the words tangled in my throat, and instead I just grabbed a mug, poured my coffee, and sat across from him in silence. We didn't need words. The truth was already carved into the air between us. That evening, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I realized something had shifted beyond repair. I wasn't just keeping a secret anymore. I was the secret. And no matter what I told myself, there was no undoing it. The betrayal wasn't coming. It was already here. The summer reached its final days with a weight I could feel in my bones. The house, once a sanctuary for unspoken truths, began to close in around us. Every room held memories now. Silent confessions etched into the air. Looks too long to be casual, words too sharp to forget. I knew the moment was coming when everything would change, when the fragile world we had built would shatter beneath the return of the family. Dean called again one afternoon, his voice light, careless, filled with excitement of their trip. I answered with practiced calm, forcing cheer into every syllable while Travis leaned against the counter, his arms folded, his eyes fixed anywhere but on me. Dean asked if we were getting along, if the house was still standing. I lied smoothly, telling him it was all fine, that nothing out of the ordinary had happened. The truth nearly burned my tongue. By the time I hung up, sweat had gathered at the base of my neck, and Travis still hadn't looked at me. Later, when the sun sank low and the house darkened, I found him outside on the back steps, staring at the yard as if searching for something invisible. I sat beside him, the wood still warm from the day's heat. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The cicadas hummed in the trees, their drone filling the silence we couldn't break. Finally, he said, "It's almost over." I nodded, though the words carved into me like glass. "Yeah. What happens then?" His voice was steady, but his hands fidgeted, twisting the hem of his shirt. I wanted to give him an answer, something solid, something that would make sense of the mess we created. But all I had was a truth, sharp and unforgiving. "We forget," I whispered. He looked at me, and in his eyes I saw the fracture between what we wanted and what we could have. The secret had given us something intoxicating, but had also stolen something we couldn't get back: trust, clarity, peace. The night before my family returned, the house was suffocatingly quiet. We sat in the living room with the TV flickering, neither of us really watching. The distance between us on the couch was wider than it had been in weeks, yet the pull remained aching and undeniable. My chest felt heavy with words I couldn't say. "I don't regret it," he said suddenly, his voice low, almost lost under the hum of the television. The admission jolted through me. I turned, staring at him in the dim light. "You should—" I managed, though my voice broke halfway through. "Do you?" His eyes didn't waver. I wanted to say yes, to bury everything under guilt and denial, but the word caught in my throat. "I don't know," I confessed, because that was the closest I could come to honesty. Silence settled again, but this time it was heavier, like a curtain falling between us. The next morning, when I woke, he was already gone from the guest room. His duffel bag was packed, his shoes missing from the doorway. I found him in the kitchen, leaning against the counter with a travel mug in his hand, ready to leave. "Dean's back tonight," he said simply, his tone casual, but his eyes betrayed the storm beneath. "Yeah," I whispered. We didn't hug. We didn't say goodbye the way friends usually did. He walked out the door, and I stood in the kitchen, staring at the space he had left behind, the silence echoing louder than any slammed door could. When my family returned that evening, the house filled with noise again. Laughter, stories, the chaos of bags and souvenirs scattered across the floor. Dean clapped me on the shoulder, asked if everything had been fine, and I nodded quickly, swallowing the weight in my throat. To him, nothing had changed. To everyone else, the world was exactly as it had been. But for me, nothing was the same. The memory of those 2 weeks clung to me like a shadow. I had betrayed my stepbrother's trust, even if he never found out. I had betrayed myself, Breaking promises I thought unshakable. And yet, I couldn't bring myself to wish it away. That night, lying in my bed with the house loud again around me, I stared at the ceiling and thought about Travis. I wondered if he was lying awake too, carrying the same ghost I was. The summer had given me something I never asked for and never should have wanted, but it was mine now, etched into me. Some secrets don't fade with time. They linger, alive in the spaces between memory and longing. And this one, the one I shared with him after my family went away, was the kind that would follow me for the rest of my life.